"Whatever you do," the man said, "without turning around, do not spill that." Nora Bell heard the words a full half-second after her elbow had already made its decision. The lid, which she had pressed on with her teeth at the corner counter of the Java cart on 8th Avenue, chose that moment to remember it had never really fit. Cold brew, 2 of them, iced, sweating through the cardboard tray in the July heat. And then not in the tray at all, but airborne. A brown ribbon uncurling in the morning light, landing with a soft and total certainty across the back and shoulder of a stranger's pale gray shirt. She would not learn until the next morning, looking up from the subway steps. Coffee-stained napkin still balled in her pocket, whose morning she had just ruined. She would look up, and his face would be swallowing the sky over Times Square, 40 feet tall and lit from within, and something in her chest would drop like a stone down a well. But that was tomorrow. This morning there was only the sound of him inhaling. "I said don't spill it," he said. He still had not turned. His voice was low, even, the kind of calm that costs a person something. "I said it out loud. I heard myself say it. You did." Nora's own voice came out thin. "You absolutely did. I want you to know I heard you too, and then my arm just, it has a mind of its own, it does this. It's a whole thing. It has a mind of its own. Not a good mind. Not a mind I'd hire." She was already crouching, already yanking napkins out of her tote, the cheap ones from the cart that dissolved into lint the second they touched anything. Okay, turn around. Let me see how bad. Please turn around. The suspense is genuinely worse than the coffee." He turned around. Later, she would try to describe him to Rita and would fail on every count. Tall. But everyone was tall when you were 5'4" in flat shoes. Dark hair pushed off his forehead by a hand that clearly did that a lot, a jaw that hadn't seen a razor in a day and a half. But it was the stillness of him that she couldn't get across, the way he stood in the middle of a sidewalk that was shoving past him on both sides. A man on a summer morning who moved like the morning could wait. His eyes went to the stain, then to her, then to the 2 empty cups sagging in her tray. "Both of them," he said. "Both of them," she agreed miserably. "One was mine. One was also going to be mine. It's a long shift." Something happened at the corner of his mouth. Not a smile. The distant relative of one. "You're wearing my whole day," he said. "You know that. I'll pay for the shirt." The words were out before her brain could count what was in her account. Or I don't know, I'll wash it. I have a very good stain pen. I have 3 of them, actually. Occupational hazard. What's the occupation that requires 3 stain pens? Flowers. She stood up, knees cracking, and pointed with a wet napkin down the block toward the little green awning with the gold letters, half of which had stopped lighting up 2 winters ago. Marguerite's. On 46th. "I do the morning open, I do the deliveries, I'm doing a wedding at 11, and I'm now going to smell like a diner." He looked at the awning. He looked at it a beat too long, the way people looked at things when they were deciding not to say the first thing that came to them. "Flowers," he repeated. "You keep repeating me. You're worth repeating. It's not a compliment, it's a diagnosis." He plucked at the wet gray cotton clinging to his collarbone, peeled it off his skin, and let it fall back. He didn't seem angry. That was the strange part. He seemed, if anything, faintly relieved, the way a man looks when a phone he's been dreading has finally rung and he can stop waiting for it. "Don't wash it. Don't buy me another one." Just? "Nothing," he shook his head once. "Go do your wedding." And that should have been it. That was the shape of every collision in this city, a spill, an apology. 2 strangers spun off in opposite directions to tell the story badly to someone else. She had already taken the first step back toward the awning. Except she looked at him one more time, and she saw it. The thing she would spend the rest of the day trying to unsee. A black car had eased up to the curb a few feet behind him and stopped where no car was allowed to stop. A man in a summer waitsuit had gotten out of it and was standing with his hands folded, watching them, wearing an earpiece and the particular patience of someone paid to wait, and the stranger with the ruined shirt hadn't so much as glanced at any of it, as if it had nothing to do with him, as if it had everything to do with him. "Sir," the suited man said quietly. "1 minute," the stranger said, not turning. Nora's feet stopped listening to her. Is that yours? The car? The man?" "No," he said, which was so obviously a lie that they both heard it land. "Right," she said. "Of course not. Why would a person who just let a stranger throw 2 coffees on him have a, you know what, none of my business. I have carnations to abuse." She hitched her tote higher. Her heart was doing something ridiculous, some drumbeat that had nothing to do with the heat. "I really am sorry. About the shirt. About your whole day, you said. I'm going to keep saying. It's a whole thing." That relative of a smile came back, closer this time. "What's your name?" And she almost told him. The N was already on her tongue. But the suited man shifted his weight, and the black car exhaled a breath of cold-conditioned air through its cracked window into the wet July heat. And some small stubborn instinct in her, the one that had spent 29 years learning that she was the person things happened around, never the person they happened to, closed her mouth. "Nobody," she said. "I'm nobody. Have a better day than the one I gave you." She turned and walked fast toward the flowers, and she did not look back. And she felt the whole time as though something with a warm hand had been set against the middle of her spine. The bell over Marguerite's door gave its usual asthmatic clank. The cool hit her first, the ancient walk-in cooler bleeding its damp green breath into the front room, and then the smell, the one that had gotten into her clothes and her hair and possibly her bloodstream years ago, cut stems in cold water. The peppery bite of eucalyptus, the funeral sweetness of lilies from the standing order. And under all of it, the wet newspaper smell of the brown paper they wrapped everything in. Marguerite Osai was behind the counter, with her reading glasses down her nose and a ledger open that she refused to move onto a computer, 71 years old and built like a woman who had carried buckets of water up basement stairs every morning for 4 decades because she had. "You smell," Marguerite said, without looking up, like the inside of a percolator. "I had an incident." "You always have an incident. That's your genre." She licked a finger, turned a page. The Delgado wedding wants their arch moved from the terrace to the ballroom because the bride has checked the sky on her telephone and decided the Lord is going to rain on her specifically. The delivery for the Hendricks Memorial is going out at 1, and I want you to double-check the ribbon. Last time you spelled beloved with 2 L's in the wrong place, and I heard about it. That was one time, and it was a very upsetting week. Marguerite finally looked up, over the glasses, and her eyes were the sharp brown of a woman who had seen every kind of trouble come through a florist's door. The engagements, the apologies, the sorries and the congratulations and the please forgive me's, the whole human parade that eventually walked in asking for stems tied with string. "You look strange. What happened to your face?" "Nothing happened to my face." "Something happened to your face. You've got that look, the one you get at the museum in front of the paintings you pretend you don't want to stand in front of." Nora set the ruined coffee tray on the counter and pushed her hair off her forehead, and against every intention she felt heat climb into her cheeks. I threw 2 iced coffees on a man on 8th Avenue. That's Tuesday for you. He had a car. Rita. A car and a man. In a suit. With an earpiece. Standing there waiting for him like he was somebody. She heard how it sounded. And he didn't even yell. That's the thing. I ruined his shirt, and he asked me my name. Marguerite set down her pen. For a long moment, the only sound was the cooler's low animal hum and the water dripping somewhere in the back and the muffled churn of the city through the glass. Then she took off her glasses and folded them with the deliberation of a woman delivering a verdict from a very old bench. Did you give it to him? No. Why not? Nora opened her mouth. Closed it. Picked at the wet corner of a napkin still stuck to her palm. Because men with cars and men in earpieces do not spend their morning learning the name of the girl who does the 6 a.m. Open at a flower shop that can't afford to fix its own sign. She said it lightly, the way you say the things that aren't light at all. He was being nice because it's an easy thing to be nice about. Tomorrow he won't remember the shirt, let alone me. Marguerite looked at her for another moment. Whatever she saw, she chose not to say it, which, from Marguerite, was its own kind of tenderness. Go move the Delgado arch, she said, and drink some water. You're the color of a peony. The wedding went the way weddings go. The bride wept in the good way, and then in the panicked way, and then in the good way again. The arch was moved, and the terrace stayed stubbornly, insultingly dry. Nora pricked her thumb twice on the florist's wire, and sucked the bead of blood off it, and kept going. Because that was the job, and the job did not care that all day. In the cool green pauses between deliveries, she kept seeing a gray shirt turning brown, and a mouth learning how to almost smile, and a man standing perfectly still in a river of people as if he had all the time in the world and no idea what to do with it. She told herself she'd already forgotten him by the time she pulled the front grate down at 7 that evening. She told herself the same thing on the platform. She told herself, on the subway home to the 4th floor walk up in Sunnyside she shared with a radiator that came on in July, and a plant she had somehow managed to keep alive out of pure spite, that a person could not miss a stranger, that missing was for things you'd actually had. She was still telling herself that at 6:40 the next morning when she came up out of the ground at Times Square, 42nd Street, half asleep, coffee, one coffee, held with both hands and the concentration of a bomb technician, clutched against her chest, on her way to another open, another wedding, another ordinary summer day. The heat was already coming up off the pavement in a shimmer. The square was doing its early morning thing, half empty and enormous, the giant screens throwing their colors down onto the wet street where a truck had just hosed the night off the concrete. A vendor was cranking up a cart. Somewhere a bus sighed. Nora came up the last of the steps with her eyes on her feet, the way you learn to in this city, and then a strange thing happened. The light changed. Not the traffic light. The light itself, the enormous ambient electric glow of the square, shifted all at once, the way a room changes when someone turns off every lamp but one. She felt it before she understood it. 100 screens going dark together, and then 100 screens coming back with the same image. She looked up. He was everywhere, 40 feet tall, on the big screen over the corner. Again on the tower across the way. Again and again and again, wrapped around the whole intersection, the same face repeated into the sky in every direction, black and white and enormous. That jaw, that hand pushing the dark hair off that forehead, those eyes that had asked her a question on 8th Avenue and that she had answered with a lie. Beneath the faces, letters bloomed one at a time across the dark, tall as doorways, spelling out a name she didn't know, and a date that was today, and a single word underneath it: return. The coffee slipped in her hands. She caught it against her chest before it could fall, which she would think, much later, was the first genuinely graceful thing her arms had done in 2 days. "Oh," she said out loud, to no one, to the whole lit-up morning. "Oh, no." Around her, the early crowd had started to stop, the way crowds do, phones lifting one after another, like a field of flowers turning toward a sun. A woman near her gasped and grabbed her friend's sleeve. Somewhere behind Nora, a man said the name on the screen out loud, reverent, disbelieving, said it the way you say a name you had given up ever hearing again, and then said, "He's back." He actually came back, and his voice cracked on it. And Nora Bell stood in the middle of Times Square with a stranger's face pouring down over her from every direction, 40 feet of the man whose entire day she had worn on his shoulder, whose name she had refused to ask for, who had asked for hers and gotten nobody, and she understood, with the cold, clean drop of a stone down a well. That she was the only person in this whole staring, gasping, phone-lifting crowd who had thrown 2 coffees on him and called him a liar and walked away. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, then buzzed again, then would not stop. She did not reach for it. She couldn't stop looking up. Because the enormous face on the screen over the corner was smiling now, the promo footage rolling. The man laughing at something off camera, and it was not the almost smile he'd given her on the sidewalk, the distant, careful relative of one. It was the whole thing. The real one. And she had the sudden, vertiginous, entirely unearned certainty, standing there in her flour-stained apron with her heart going like a hammer, that she had seen the smaller version first. That the giant laughing stranger in the sky had shown a sidewalk nobody something the whole waking world was only now paying to look at. The screens held his face 1 beat longer, and then her phone buzzed a 3rd time, and this time she looked, and the number on it was one she didn't know, with a Manhattan area code and a single line of a message glowing up at her through the cracked glass. And whatever she had told herself about being forgotten by 7 o'clock the night before, she understood, reading it, that going back to yesterday was no longer a thing that was going to be allowed. The number glowed up at her through the cracked glass, and the message under it was not from him. Miss Bell, regarding the incident yesterday morning on 8th Avenue. Please call this number at your earliest convenience. Discretion is appreciated. Office of V. Shaw. Nora read it 3 times while the giant faces held above her, and each time the same word snagged and would not come loose. Bell, Miss Bell. She had stood on that sidewalk and pressed her lips together and given him nothing. Had walked away leaving him the whole of 1 iced coffee morning and not a single letter of her name, and here it was, spelled correctly, sitting in a stranger's phone 18 hours later, next to the word incident, next to the word discretion, which was a word people only used when they were already deciding you were a mess to be cleaned up. Her mouth had gone dry as chalk. The vendor's cart hissed steam into the heat. Somewhere a girl was crying happily into her phone, saying his name to whoever she'd called at 6 in the morning. Julian. Oh my God, Julian Alder. No, I'm looking at it right now. And up on the tower the letters bloomed again, tall as doorways, that name and that date, and that one flat word underneath. Return, so that was the name. Julian Alder. It meant nothing to her, and it meant everything to the 50 people now standing where they'd been walking, their necks bent back, their faces washed pale blue and then white in the changing light. A man beside her had both hands pressed to his mouth. A woman was weeping without seeming to notice she'd started. Nora put her phone face down against her sternum. On top of the one coffee she had somehow not sacrificed to the gods this morning, and she walked. She walked the way she'd walked yesterday, fast, head down, feet remembering the route her brain had abandoned, down 42nd, up 7th, and the whole time the phone buzzed against her breastbone like a trapped thing, and she did not answer it. And the letters of her own name followed her down every block she knew. The bell over Marguerite's door gave its asthmatic clank, and the cold green breath of the cooler reached out and grabbed her. And for one whole second the smell of it, cut stems, wet paper, the peppery eucalyptus, the cool damp funeral sweetness, was the only thing in the entire lit-up screaming city that had not changed since yesterday. "You're early," said Marguerite, without looking up from the ledger, which means something is wrong. "You are never early. You are a woman who considers on time to be a personal achievement." Rita, Nora, set the coffee down. Her hands weren't quite working. Rita, the man. From yesterday. The coffee man. He's on every screen in Times Square right now. All of them. His face is 40 feet tall, and there's a woman on 7th Avenue crying about it into a phone, and I got a text message that has my last name in it, and I never told him my last name, I never told him my first name, I told him I was nobody, and there is an office. Rita, he has an office, and the office knows my name. Sit down before you fall down. You've gone the color of a lily, and it does not suit you. Marguerite finally lifted her eyes over the reading glasses, and for one flicker Nora thought she saw something move behind them. Not surprise. Exactly. Recognition's older, quieter cousin. What is his name? Julian Alder. The pen stopped. It was such a small thing. A 71-year-old woman with a pen in her hand, and the pen simply stopped moving across the page, and the little scratch of the nib that had been the undersound of the whole room went silent. And into that silence the cooler hummed its low animal hum, and a bucket dripped somewhere in the back, and the July street churned muffled behind the glass. Marguerite did not look up now. She looked at the ledger. She looked at it the way, Nora would think later, a person looks at a name they have not said out loud in a long time. "Say it again," Marguerite said. Julian Alder. "Rita, do you know it? You know the name. I know a great many names." She turned a page and turned it back and set the pen down flat and folded her hands on top of the ledger as though to keep it shut. Everyone your age knew that name once. He made songs. He made 3 records, and then he stopped 3 summers ago, walked off a stage in the middle of a tour, and did not come back, and the whole silly world decided that was the most fascinating thing a man had ever done. Vanished, her mouth pulled sideways. As if a person is a magician's handkerchief. As if we do not all vanish a little every day, and no one puts it on a screen. You're doing the thing. What thing? The thing where you answer a completely different question than the one I asked. Very beautifully, so I forget I asked one. Something that was nearly a smile crossed the old woman's face and did not stay. Drink your water. You have the Ferrera christening to build and a delivery to the Aldous at noon, and you are standing there vibrating like a struck spoon over a man who let you throw coffee on him. Whatever is on that telephone, it is not going anywhere. Trouble, she said, picking her pen back up, keeps, but she had not asked, Nora noticed. That was the strange part. Rita, who wanted to know everything, who prized the gossip out of every bride and every widower and every delivery boy who came through that door, Rita had not asked what the office wanted, or what the message said, or why a florist's assistant should be getting texts from Julian Alder's people at all. She had heard the name and she had shut the ledger. And now she was pretending very hard to be interested in an invoice for hydrangeas. Nora drank her water. She went into the back and pulled the christening flowers, white ranunculus going soft and open in the cooler's cold, and she wired the first spray with her thumb finding, from memory, the 2 calices it had earned over 7 years. And she tried to think about anything at all except 40 feet of a laughing face, and she failed, and the phone in her apron pocket buzzed twice more against her hip like a heartbeat that wasn't hers. She did not call the office. She told herself it was because she was busy. She was not busy enough to believe it. At 11, the black car came back. She saw it through the front glass before she understood what she was seeing. The same low, patient, gleaming black shape easing to the curb outside a flower shop where no car was allowed to stop, its dark window sliding down an inch and then thinking better of it. The delivery vans double-parked all day on this block and got tickets for their trouble. This car stopped where it liked. And the meter maid 3 doors down looked at it and looked away. The way you look away from weather you can't do anything about. The door opened. It was not the man in the summer weight suit. It was a woman. She came into the shop, and the bell clanked over her, and she stood for a moment just inside the door, and Nora, watching from behind the counter with a length of ribbon still looped over her wrist, understood that she was being appraised, swiftly, completely, the way you appraise a stain to decide which solvent it needs. The woman was perhaps 50, in a sleeveless ivory dress that had cost more than Nora's rent, and did not have the decency to look like it, her hair a smooth silver blonde helmet, sunglasses pushed up, a phone in one hand held not to her ear, but ready, always ready, like a small, flat weapon. "Nora Bell," the woman said. Not a question. She had the kind of voice that had removed all the questions from itself years ago as an efficiency. "You didn't call. I was going to. No, you weren't." She smiled, and it was a good smile, warm even, the smile of a person who had learned that warmth was the single most useful tool in the box, and used it accordingly. Vivian Shaw. "I manage Mr. Alder's affairs. Among other things, I manage what happens when Mr. Alder does something unwise, which he does, on average, twice a decade, and which he did yesterday morning on 8th Avenue at approximately 7:10. The cooler hummed. Somewhere in the back a bucket dripped. Nora set the ribbon down on the counter very carefully, the way you set down something you might otherwise throw. "He didn't do anything unwise. I threw coffee on him. That was me. That was 100% a me situation." Vivian moved to the counter, and her heels made a sound on the old tile that the tile had never heard before, a clean, expensive click, and she set the phone face up between them and rested one manicured finger on it, lightly. The way you rest a finger on a bell you have not yet decided to ring. "Miss Bell, I'm going to be very straight with you, because I've found that flowers people and honest people are frequently the same people, and I like to bet on odds. Do you know what today is?" Tuesday. The warm smile flickered. Appreciation, almost, quickly filed away. Today, at noon, in about 45 minutes, Julian Alder will stand in front of 200 cameras and announce that he is returning. New record. A run of shows. 3 years of the entire industry wondering whether he was ever coming back, resolved, in one press conference, in a very expensive suit. Do you understand the machinery it takes to make a morning like that happen? The people, the money, the years? I'm getting a sense of it, Nora said. There's a car outside that's been triple parked for 10 minutes and no one's ticketed it, which where I live is basically a miracle of the loaves and fishes. He was not supposed to be on 8th Avenue yesterday. He was supposed to be nowhere. He was supposed to be a rumor until noon today. Vivian's finger tapped, once, on the dark glass of the phone. Instead, he was on a public sidewalk, unshaven, alone, buying his own coffee like a normal person, which he is not, and a young woman decorated him with 2 of them, and then declined to give him her name and my security lead, who is very good, Miss Bell, and whom you did not notice, because that is his job. Followed you at a distance to a flower shop with a broken sign, made 3 phone calls, and by 9 o'clock last night, I knew your name, your address, your employer, the fact that you are 29, and the fact that you keep a plant alive on a 4th-floor windowsill in Sunnyside out of what your building superintendent described as, quote, pure spite. The room tilted, very slightly, and righted itself. Nora's heart was going hard and cold now, not the ridiculous drumbeat from the sidewalk. Something else. She had to stop and find the word. That's a genuinely horrifying amount of information about a person who threw coffee on somebody. Yes, said Vivian Shaw, not unkindly. It is. I'm telling you all of it on purpose. I want you to understand exactly how visible you are, so that you understand exactly why I'm about to be generous. She slid the phone an inch toward Nora and turned it so the screen woke, and on it was a document, clean and gray, a lot of small paragraphs, and a signature line at the bottom with a little inked X waiting beside it. Confidentiality. Very simple. You don't speak to anyone, press, friends, a man on a bar stool, a group chat, about Mr. Alder, about yesterday, about anything you saw on that sidewalk, including the car, including my colleague, including the fact that he was where he wasn't meant to be. In exchange, the shirt is forgiven, and a sum lands in your account this afternoon that will strike you as insulting until you realize it's more than you make in a year, at which point it will strike you as a great deal of flowers. Nora looked at the little inked X. She looked at Vivian Shaw's warm, steady, entirely sincere eyes. She looked, past both of them, through the glass, at the black car sitting outside her whole small life, like a held breath. "What did I see?" she said slowly. "That's worth a year of flowers to unsee?" For the first time, Vivian Shaw was quiet a beat too long. And in that beat the bell over the door gave its asthmatic clank, and the green cold breath of the cooler stirred, and a man's voice, low, even, the kind of calm that costs a person something, a voice she had heard exactly once and would apparently now hear in her sleep, said, from the doorway, "She saw me not want it, Viv. That's the part you can't buy back." Julian Alder stood in the door of Marguerite's with the July heat pouring in behind him and the cooler's chill pouring out to meet it. And for a moment the 2 temperatures fought across the threshold, and he stood exactly in the seam of them. And he was, Nora registered with a kind of despair, wearing a fresh gray shirt. A different one, pale gray, crisp, buttoned to a collar that framed a jaw shaved clean now, the day and a half of stubble gone, the dark hair pushed off the forehead by that same hand. He looked like the screens. He looked like a man who had been assembled that morning by professionals, only the eyes were the sidewalk eyes. "You're supposed to be at the Carlisle," Vivian said. She had not turned around. Her voice had not changed at all, which was somehow the most alarming thing yet. "You are supposed to be in a chair, having your face made presentable for 200 cameras in 40 minutes. You are supposed to be anywhere that is not a flower shop on 46th Street. I know exactly where I'm supposed to be. He came in. The bell had gone quiet. He looked around the front room, the buckets, the ribbon spools, the cooler with its sweating glass door, the ledger shut on the counter under Marguerite's folded hands, and something in his face eased and tightened at the same time. A man walking into a room he'd been walking toward for longer than the last 2 days. "It's a nice shop," he said. "The sign's broken." 2 winters ago, Nora said, before she could stop herself. The ballast went in the second bank of letters, and the guy wanted $400, and Rita said the good Lord managed the burning bush on nothing, so we could manage half a sign. Half a sign. That relative of a smile again, closer now, the way it had come closer yesterday, degree by degree. Marguerite's with half the letters lit. So at night it says, "Argue rights," said Marguerite from the counter, in the flat tone of a woman who had been waiting years for someone to notice. "The neighborhood finds it very appropriate." He laughed. It cracked out of him, short and surprised, and Nora watched Vivian Shaw's shoulders register it the way a sailor registers a change in the wind, a small tightening. A recalculation. He was not supposed to be laughing in a flower shop. There was a schedule for his laughing, and this was not on it. Julian. Vivian turned around now, and she had put the warm smile away entirely, and what was underneath it was not cold. That was the surprise of her. It was tired and fond and afraid, all braided together. "Sweetheart, I have kept this in the air for 3 years. I have kept every wolf off you for 3 years. In 40 minutes, you tell the world you came back, and it works. And the whole thing holds, but only if you are the story. Not her. Not a sidewalk. You do not," she said, and her voice did something small and human on the last word. "Do not hand them a girl to eat instead of you. They will eat her. They eat everyone. You know that better than any man alive." The room was very still. The cooler dripped, and Nora, standing there in her flower-stained apron, with a length of christening ribbon at her elbow and a document glowing on a stranger's phone, felt the whole thing pivot around her, felt herself become, in the space of 1 sentence, not a person who had spilled a coffee, but a thing that could be handed over, a thing that could be eaten. "I'm not signing that," she heard herself say. Everyone looked at her. "Not because I want anything." Her face was hot. Her voice was doing the thin thing again, but she kept going. You can have the shirt, and the sidewalk, and I wasn't going to tell anyone anyway. Who would I tell? Rita already thinks it's Tuesday. I'm not signing it, because there's a number on there with a lot of zeros, and the second I sign it, I become a person who took money to be quiet about you. And I've spent 29 years being nobody, which is, honestly, a decent gig. It's peaceful. But I never once got paid to be it, and I'd rather stay nobody for free than be somebody's cleaned-up incident for a year of flowers. She pushed the phone gently 1 inch back across the counter toward Vivian Shaw. "So, no thank you. I have a christening to build." Julian Alder looked at her for a long moment, and the sidewalk eyes had come all the way to the surface now, and whatever was behind them, it was not the face on the screens. It was the smaller one, the one she'd seen first. "Bell," he said quietly. "Nora Bell. That's what your creepy phone calls tell me. I came here yesterday," he said, on purpose. "Julian," Vivian's voice was a blade laid flat. "She's not signing anything, Viv, so she may as well know the true thing instead of guessing at a worse one." He didn't look away from Nora. "I wasn't buying coffee. I was standing across the street from this shop at 7 in the morning, trying to make myself walk in the door. And I'd been standing there 20 minutes, and I bought the coffee so I'd have a reason to be standing there. And then a woman came around the corner with 2 cold brews and the whole speech I'd rehearsed for 3 years, and his mouth tilted, she erased it. Off my shoulder, off my back, all of it. And I have to tell you, it was the first thing in 3 years that happened to me that nobody planned. Nora's throat had closed. Behind her, she was aware, distantly, the way you're aware of a change in a room's air pressure before a storm, that Marguerite Osai had risen from her stool and had put one hand flat on the closed ledger and was standing very straight. 71 years old and built like a woman who had carried water up basement stairs, and was looking at Julian Alder with an expression Nora had never once seen on that face in 7 years. "You were coming to my shop," Marguerite said. Her voice was low, not to her, to me. Julian turned, and the crisp assembled press conference man went out of him all at once, like water out of a cracked glass. And what was left standing in the middle of the flower shop was just a person, a tired one, holding something he'd carried a long way. "You wrote me a letter," he said, 3 years ago. When I walked off that stage, and everybody in my life was screaming at me except one person, who sent a letter to a hotel in a city I was hiding in, care of a florist on 46th Street, and signed it only with the name of the shop. I read it maybe 200 times. I kept it through 3 years of everyone telling me who I was supposed to be. He swallowed. "I came back to the city yesterday to do this, the noise, the cameras, the whole return. And before I could stand up and be the thing they built, I needed to stand in the one room in this city where somebody told me the truth for free. I just didn't have the nerve to open the door. And then a florist threw 2 coffees on me instead." The phone on the counter lit up, silent, insistent Vivian Shaw's, buzzing itself in a slow circle on the glass. The Carlisle calling, the 200 cameras calling, the machinery calling for the man who was supposed to be its story. Nobody moved to answer it. Marguerite's hand had come up to her mouth. And Nora stood between the two of them, between the shut ledger and the ringing phone, understanding perfectly that she had walked into the middle of something that had begun 3 years before she spilled anything on anyone, and understanding, with the cold, clean drop of a stone down a well, that the letter he'd read 200 times had not been written by the woman standing white, faced with her hand at her lips. Because Marguerite Osai did not write letters. Nora had done every scrap of the shop's writing for 7 years. Every card, every invoice, every ribbon, every letter. The phone on the counter buzzed a final time and went still, and in the silence Vivian Shaw looked from Julian's face to Marguerite's to Nora's, reading the 3 of them like weather rolling in off a coast she'd sailed her whole life, and her tired, fond, frightened eyes came at last to rest on Nora, and she said, very softly, in a voice that had finally run entirely out of warmth, "Oh." "Oh no, it was you. It was me," Nora said, and the words came out of her sideways, wrong, like a key that had been cut for another door. "It was, okay, everybody keeps saying things at me in a certain tone, and I need one of you to say the thing plainly, in a sentence, with a subject and a verb, because I build christenings for a living, and I have never once in my life been the thing that a rich woman goes pale about in a flower shop." Nobody answered her. The cooler hummed its low animal note behind the sweating glass. A bucket dripped in the back, patient as a clock. Out on 46th, a delivery truck let off its brakes with a hiss that seemed to go on too long, and the July heat pressed a hot palm against the front window while the cold green breath of the shop pushed back against her bare arms, and Nora stood in the exact seam of the two the way Julian had stood in the door a minute before, wanting to move and unable to, wanting the answer and already. somewhere below her ribs, dreading the shape of it. Vivian Shaw recovered first. She always would. It was the whole architecture of her. The paleness folded itself away behind the warm, useful smile, and she picked her phone up off the counter, and for 1 second, just one, her manicured thumb hovered over the dark glass as though she might actually turn it toward Nora again. Might try the little inked X one more time now that the number attached to it had quietly, in her head, grown a great deal larger. "Miss Bell," she said, "I'm going to need you to sit down. I don't want to sit down. Sitting down is what you do before somebody tells you a thing you can't unknow. Rita made me sit down this morning, and look how that's going." Nora. That was Julian. Just her name, low, even, the calm that costs a person something. He hadn't moved from the middle of the room. He was looking at her the way she'd caught him looking at the awning yesterday, a beat too long, deciding not to say the first thing. The letter came to the chateau in a city I'm not going to name, on a rainy Tuesday, 3 years and 1 month ago. It was addressed to me, care of a flower shop on 46th Street. It came tucked behind a delivery card in an arrangement of white ranunculus that somebody's record label had sent to apologize for something I've since forgotten. The card said the professional thing, and then behind it, folded twice, in blue ink, in a hand that slants uphill at the end of every line like it's trying to get away from itself, there was a letter that did not say the professional thing at all. Nora's mouth had gone to chalk again. She knew the hand. Of course she knew the hand. She had watched it slant uphill across 10,000 cards, across ribbons, across the misspelled beloved that Rita had heard about for a week. "White ranunculus," she said faintly. "White ranunculus," Julian said. Behind the counter, Marguerite Osset made a small sound, not a word, just breath finding an edge, and sat back down on her stool, as though her knees had reconsidered the whole enterprise of holding her up. Nora put both hands flat on the counter. The old tile-topped counter, cool and nicked and stained purple in one corner from a decade of dahlias, and she leaned on it and let it hold what her legs had stopped volunteering to. "I remember the order," she said. Her voice had gone very quiet, and the shop leaned in around it. "It was the week the radiator in my old place finally gave up and I was sleeping in 2 sweaters in April. There was a rush order for a hotel in another city, one of the ones we never delivered to in person but shipped instead, and the card copy the label sent over was, it was nothing. It was thinking of you in this difficult time. The kind of thing people pay other people to feel for them. And I'd seen you. On the television at the laundromat. Everybody had. A man walking off a stage in the middle of a song and just leaving, setting the thing down and walking into the dark at the back like the song had asked him a question he couldn't answer in front of that many people. "Nora," Vivian said, a warning, gentle as a hand on a door. Nora didn't hear her. She was somewhere else, in a colder April. And everyone at the laundromat was so angry about it. This total stranger, they were furious, like he owed them the rest of the song. And I remember folding a bedsheet and thinking, no, he doesn't. He doesn't owe anybody the rest of anything. Her thumb found the callus on her other palm and pressed it, hard, an old habit her body did when her chest got too full. So I wrote it down. On a delivery card, which I then threw away because it looked insane, and then on a piece of the brown wrapping paper, which looked worse, and finally on the back of an invoice, in blue ink because it was the only pen that hadn't dried out. And I put it behind the label's card, and I sent it to a hotel I'd never heard of for a man I would never meet, and I signed it, Marguerite's Julian said, because that's how I sign everything. Because I'm not the shop. The shop has a name, and it's on the awning, half lit. She laughed, and it came out cracked, nothing like a laugh. I never once thought a person read it. I thought it went in a bin at a fancy hotel with the plastic and the ranunculus when they went soft. That's what happens to the things I write. They go out under somebody else's name and they hold flowers for one day, and then they're gone. That's the entire job. That is the peaceful, excellent, invisible job. It didn't go in a bin, Julian said. No, Nora said. Apparently it went to Times Square. Vivian Shaw's phone lit again, buzzing itself in a slow half circle on the counter, and this time a name flashed on it that made even Nora, who knew nothing, understand it was the important kind, a hotel, a time, a countdown wearing a person's job title. 34 minutes. The number sat there, glowing between all of them like a coal. Julian. Vivian's voice had changed gear entirely now. The fond and the frightened folded away with the paleness, and what was left was the flat, fast, competent register of a woman who managed what happened when a man did something unwise. I need you to hear me, and I need you to hear me as the person who has kept the roof over your head and everybody else's for 3 years. Not as whatever you turned into the second you walked through that door. This is worse. Do you understand me? This is not a girl on a sidewalk anymore. This is the letter. This is the letter you've told exactly one journalist about, off the record, badly, 3 years ago, and which has been half a legend ever since, the anonymous note. The stranger who told the great vanished man it was all right to vanish. Do you know what they'll build out of her now? She turned to Nora, and her eyes were not unkind, which was still the most alarming thing about her. They'll build a fairy tale, and then, because it's a fairy tale, and fairy tales are the most fun to burn, they'll build the fire, and they'll put you on it. The florist who's had her hooks in him for 3 years. The mystery woman, Miss Bell. By Friday, there will be a photograph of your building and a headline over it, and your superintendent will sell them the spite plant. Leave the plant out of it, Nora said, but her voice had lost its floor. I'm trying to, said Vivian. That is precisely, exactly what I am standing in a flower shop trying to do. Marguerite rose from the stool a second time, slower now, and she did not raise her voice. Because Marguerite Osai had never in 7 years needed to raise her voice to end a conversation. You will not, she said, burn my girl on this counter to keep your morning tidy. Mrs. Osai, Marguerite. She came around the end of the counter, one hand trailing the tile the way she trailed it every evening at close, and she planted herself between Vivian Shaw and Nora with the unhurried certainty of a woman who had carried buckets up basement stairs for 40 years and had strong feelings about what was worth carrying and what could be set down. I knew your name before she said it, Mr. Alder. When she came in this morning, breathless, with the whole silly sky falling on her, and she said Julian Alder, my pen stopped. You want to know why my pen stopped? Rita, Nora said. You don't have to. Because for 3 years, Marguerite said, I have wondered which of my cards you kept. I sent flowers to that hotel. She lifted her chin. The label ordered the arrangement, yes, but I chose the ranunculus. The label wanted lilies, funeral lilies, for a man who was not gone, only tired, and I said no. I said give him something that opens, and I sent white ranunculus, which opens slow, over days, when you have almost stopped watching. And I thought, foolish old woman, I thought perhaps a man who noticed the difference between a lily and a ranunculus had noticed me. She exhaled, and 30 years of dignity went into keeping the exhale even. It was not me you noticed. It was what she folded behind my card. Well, Her mouth did something complicated. That is the correct thing. She is the better writer. She always spelled beloved wrong, but she is the better writer. God help us both. The shop was very quiet. Even the cooler seemed to hold its breath. Nora had put her hand over her mouth without deciding to, and over the top of it her eyes had filled, hot and stinging in the cold green air. Rita, don't. Marguerite patted the air between them, brusque, her own eyes suspiciously bright behind the reading glasses she had not put back on. We are not going to do the whole thing in front of the rich woman with the countdown. It is undignified, and she is billing someone for her time. Julian crossed the room. He did it the way he did everything, without hurry, as if the morning could wait. Except now, Nora could see the cost of the slowness, could see that he was making himself walk instead of stride, making himself be a man in a flower shop instead of a man with 200 cameras 30 minutes out, and a woman he'd carried in his jacket for 3 years standing 4 feet away with her hand over her mouth. He reached into the breast of the crisp gray shirt, into an inside pocket, and he took out a wallet worn soft as a river stone at the corners. And from the wallet he took a piece of paper folded twice, so many times over so many years that the folds had gone furred and pale, the blue ink faded at the creases where the light and his thumb had worked at it. He didn't open it. He held it out on his flat palm, the way Vivian's colleague had folded his hands on the sidewalk, the way you offer something to an animal you don't want to spook. "I'm not going to read it out," Julian said. "It's yours. You'd have to give me permission, and there's no time, and anyway, I don't need to. I know it by heart. I've known it by heart since the 2nd week." His voice stayed low, even, and only at the very end of the sentence did it slant uphill, trying to get away from itself. "You wrote that the world was going to tell me walking off that stage was the bravest or the most cowardly thing I'd ever done, and that both of those were the same lie, because both of them made it about the audience. And you wrote that some songs you finish and some songs finish you, and that a person is allowed to be the second kind of thing and still deserve his supper and a warm room. And you signed it with a shop." He turned his hand slightly so the folded paper caught the cold light. "I have read a great many things people have written about me. That is the only true one. I came back to this city to become the man on those screens again for a while longer. Because a lot of people I love eat because I do. But I could not do it until I stood in the room where the true sentence came from. That's all. That's the whole confession. I didn't know it would come with coffee." Nora looked at the furred blue paper on his palm, and she did not reach for it. It felt, absurdly, like the most naked thing in the room. More naked than his ruined shoulder yesterday, more naked than his 40-foot face this morning. It was her own uphill handwriting, 3 years old, telling a stranger he deserved a warm room, in the April when she'd been sleeping in 2 sweaters and couldn't have said the same kind thing to herself if her life had asked for it. "Put it away," she whispered. "Please, put it away before somebody comes through that door and makes it worth money." He folded his hand shut over it at once. The bell clanked. Everyone's head turned, and for one plunging instant Nora was certain it was already happening. Cameras, the fire, the headline over her building. But it was only the man in the summer weight suit. The security lead she had not noticed yesterday and could not stop noticing now, and he did not step inside. He held the door with one flat hand and spoke to the room without seeming to look at any single person in it. 26 minutes, he said. "The car has to leave in 4, or we run the lights. And if we run the lights, someone films the car running the lights, and that's the story instead of the story." He had a low, pleasant voice, apologetic. The voice of a man who ruined mornings gently for a living. Miss Shaw, I heard him. Daniel, I know you heard him. I'm saying it for the room. Vivian Shaw looked at Julian, and Julian looked at Nora, and Nora watched something pass across his face that she would think about for a long time afterward, the exact moment a person chooses which of two rooms he's going to be standing in and understands he can't take the other room with him. He stepped back, one step, and with the step the crispness came up over him again, not all at once, but rising. The shaved jaw and the assembled shoulders and the collar that framed the screen's version of him, the water pouring back into the cracked glass. "Come with me," he said. "What?" "To the Carlyle. Not the room with the cameras. You don't go anywhere near that. There's a room before that room. There's always a room before the room. Come." And for 1 second the sidewalk eyes broke back through. "I don't want to walk out of the only true room in the city and straight into the false one with nothing of the true one on me. Come and stand in the room before the room. That's all. You can leave the second it's ugly. It's going to get ugly." "Julian," said Vivian very softly, and it was not a no. It was worse than a no. It was the particular quiet of a person who has decided to let someone find out the hard way. Nora looked at Marguerite. Marguerite looked back at her over the reading glasses and did not tell her what to do, which was its own verdict, and only said, gruffly, "The christening will keep." Ranunculus, open, slow. That is the entire point of them. She should have said no. Every year of being the person things happened around told her to say no, told her that the room before the room was not a room for people who spelled beloved wrong, that she would stand in it in her flower, stained apron, and be a smudge on a morning that had cost millions, that the kind thing she'd folded behind Rita's card 3 years ago was the one good clean thing she'd done, and she should let it stay clean, unpaid, unphotographed, hers. She said, "I'm not changing out of the apron." Julian's mouth did the whole smile then, the real one, the one the screens had, and it was worse in person by an order of magnitude because it was aimed only at her and it made no sense that it should be. "Argue rights," he said, "does not have a dress code." And she laughed, helplessly, wetly, and hated how much she needed to, and picked up her tote, the one with the 3 stain pens, the dissolving napkins, the whole ridiculous kit of a woman who cleaned up after other people's spills, and followed Julian Alder out of the cold green breath of the shop into the white hammer of the July street, past the meter maid who looked away, into the back of the black car that idled where no car was allowed to idle, and the door shut behind her with a sound like a held breath finally being let go, and the city outside went smoked and quiet and cool. The car pulled out. Nora watched Marguerite's, with half its letters dark, slide backward past the window until the awning was only a green smear, and she thought, "This is the part where I should feel it coming." She did not feel it coming. That was the thing about the point of no return. You were always already past it, before the road gave you the sign. The room before the room was on the 2nd floor of the Carlyle, and it did not look like a room where a life was decided. It looked like a nice living room that had been visited by a small, efficient hurricane. There were garment bags hung from a picture rail. There were 3 people with earpieces and 1 with a steamer. There was a long mirror ringed in warm bulbs and a chair in front of it, and a woman waiting by the chair with a small brush and a face of enormous calm. And there were screens. Of course there were screens. There were always screens now. One on the wall showing a grand ballroom 2 floors down, already filling with folding chairs and tripods and the particular restless sound of a great many people waiting to be told something. Nora stood just inside the door with her tote clutched to her stomach and felt the apron on her like a costume from the wrong play. You can stand there, Vivian said, not unkindly, arriving beside her with a bottle of water she pressed into Nora's hand as though hydration were a form of custody. By the window. Out of the shot, out of the light, out of the way. He'll go in through that door, he'll be gone 40 minutes, and then this is over and you go back to your christening and none of it ever happened. That's still the best version, Miss Bell. I want you to know I'm still trying to give you the best version, even now. Even like this. Why even like this? Vivian looked at her, and for a moment, the tiredness came all the way up. Because I've watched them do it to people before, she said simply. Nice people. People who never asked to be a story. I'm the one who's still here after, holding the pieces, telling the pieces there was nothing they could have done. I would genuinely, sincerely, prefer to skip that conversation with you. That's my whole cold black heart, laid on the counter. Drink your water. Across the room, in the chair, Julian sat still under the woman's small brush and let himself be finished. Nora watched it happen. She watched the last of the sidewalk go out of him, watched him become photograph smooth, and she understood for the first time what Vivian had meant about machinery. Not the cars and the earpieces and the countdowns, but this, the quiet violence of a man agreeing to be simplified, holding still while somebody brushed the complications off his face. Then his eyes found hers in the mirror, across all of it, and one corner of his mouth moved, not for the room, not for the cameras, for her. And she felt the stone down a well drop of it in reverse, something rising instead of falling, and she thought, dangerously, foolishly, in a flower-stained apron by a window at the Carlyle, oh no, this is the thing that happens to me. This is finally the thing that's happening to me and not around me. She would remember thinking it. That was the cruelty of the next 4 minutes. She would remember thinking it right up against the moment it curdled. It came in through Daniel, the way weather comes in through the one window you left open. He crossed the hurricaned room fast and low and put his phone in front of Vivian without a word, and Nora watched Vivian's face do the thing faces did in this world, go smooth to hide the fact that something underneath had just moved. Vivian read. She scrolled. She read again. When, she said, 11 minutes ago. Someone at the square this morning got the two of them from yesterday, him on the sidewalk, the shirt, her crouching with the napkins. And then someone matched it to the Times Square crowd shot, the coffee girl looking up. They've got a face. They don't have a name yet. Daniel's pleasant apologetic voice did not change. They will. Vivian closed her eyes for exactly 1 second. Then she was moving, crossing to the chair, bending to Julian's ear, murmuring fast and flat, and Nora couldn't hear the words, but she could read the shape of them in the way Julian's finished. Photograph's smooth face went carefully blank. And in the way, when Vivian straightened, she did not look back at the window where Nora stood. On the wall screen, 2 floors down, a man stepped up to the lectern in the ballroom and tapped the microphone, and the restless sound of the waiting people gathered itself into a hush. They'll ask him, Vivian said to the room, to the earpieces, to nobody, to everybody. Front row will ask him about the woman inside the first 3 questions. We get ahead of it, or it eats the whole announcement. She turned, finally, and looked at Julian, and her voice was gentle and terrible. You know the line. We built the line for exactly this. Give them the line, and we all go home. Viv, give them the line, Julian. It protects her. That is the part you keep refusing to hear because you've decided the flower shop was real. The line is the only thing standing between her and Friday. Say the small, unkind, true enough thing, and she stays a stranger, and her building never gets photographed, and her plant lives. Or say the big kind true thing and hand them the fairy tale and hand her to the fire. Those are the 2 doors. Pick fast. The little light is going green. And on the screen, a woman 2 floors down said, "Please welcome," and the ballroom stood. And the light over the far door in the room before the room went from red to green. Julian rose out of the chair. He looked at Nora once. Across the garment bags and the earpieces and the steamer's hiss, across the whole warm bulbed hurricane, he looked at her. And she could not read it. That was the worst part, that after the sidewalk and the letter and the mirror, she suddenly could not read his face at all. Because there was nothing in it, because he had let them brush the complications off. And then he walked through the green door, and its side shut behind him, and a second later the screen on the wall filled. 40 inches now instead of 40 feet, but the same face, the same jaw, the same hand pushing the same dark hair off the same forehead. And the ballroom roared. Someone turned the volume up. Nora didn't ask them to. She stood at the window with the unopened water sweating in her hand and watched the small screen version of the enormous morning. And Julian said the returning things, the record, the run of shows, the thank yous, the well-built sentences about being ready now, about the songs that finish you and the ones you finish. And she heard her own letter come out of his mouth, dressed in a suit and given. To 200 people, and even that she could have forgiven, even that. Then a man in the front row stood up. "Julian, welcome back, Julian. There's a photograph circulating this morning, you on 8th Avenue yesterday, and a woman. People are already calling her the coffee girl. Some people are saying she's the one who, the letter, 3 years ago, the anonymous note. Is that her? Who is she to you?" The room before the room went absolutely still. The steamer stopped hissing. Daniel folded his hands. Vivian did not breathe. And on the screen, Julian Alder paused. 1 beat. 2. A pause that Nora, alone at the window, let herself pour her whole ridiculous rising hope into, thinking he can't, he won't. He held the letter on his palm like it was alive. "She's no one," Julian said. The screen carried it perfectly. The good microphones, the money, the machinery, all of it bent to carry those 2 small words across 2 floors and into the room where she stood in her apron. He even did it well. He did it with a little rueful smile, exactly the right amount of charm, a man swatting away a silly rumor to protect a private mourning. "Some woman spilled a coffee on me on a sidewalk. It was a Tuesday. That's the entire story, and honestly, it's the most normal thing that's happened to me in 3 years. A ripple of warm laughter from 200 people. She's nobody. Now." The tour. Nobody. The word she had handed him herself, on the sidewalk, in the sun, as armor. "I'm nobody. I'm nobody. Have a better day than the one I gave you." The word she had worn like a coat her whole life. Because a coat you choose can't be used against you. He had picked it up off the ground where she'd dropped it, and he had put it in front of 200 cameras and made it true. The water bottle slipped in Nora's hand. She caught it against her chest before it could fall, and thought, from very far away, that it was the second graceful thing her arms had done in 2 days, and that she would give back both of them, and every stain pen she owned to be, at the 6 a.m. open right now, with cold stems and wet paper, and a sign that could only afford to argue. "Miss Bell." Vivian was beside her again, and her voice had gone soft. Softer than the whole cold morning, the voice of a woman who had held a great many pieces. "He did it for you. I know it doesn't feel like it. In about a week you'll know it's the kindest thing he could have. Don't." Nora's voice came out even. She was surprised by how even. The calm that costs a person something, she understood now where he'd learned it. "Don't tell me what it was." I've spent my whole life being told what the thing that just happened to me actually was, by people who were relieved I hadn't made a fuss. She set the unopened water down on the windowsill, carefully, the way you set down something you might otherwise throw. I'm going to go build a christening now. Ranunculus opened slow. Somebody should be there when they do. She walked to the door of the room before the room, past the garment bags and the mirror ringed in warm bulbs, and Vivian said her name once, and Daniel stepped half out of her way, with an expression that was almost sorrow. And behind her on the screen, 200 people were laughing at something the man on it had said. The whole waking world paying now to look at the face she had seen smaller first. And Nora Bell put her hand on the cool brass of the door and did not turn around, and understood, with the clean drop of everything at once, that the coat had never been armor after all. It had just been the size of her, cut to fit, all along. She opened the door. Down the hall, an elevator was already waiting, its doors held open by a stranger's patient hand, and beyond it, 22 floors of a city that had her name now, and her building, and her spite plant, and a Friday coming that no one in that bright ruined room had any idea how to stop. The elevator held its patience the way only expensive machines could, its doors parked open on a hand in a burgundy sleeve, a bellman, young, kind-faced, who had clearly been told to hold it and had no idea for whom. Nora stepped in past him. The carpet swallowed her feet. The mirrored walls threw her back at herself a dozen times over, apron and flower of pollen and eyes gone glassy. A whole gallery of the woman who was no one. Descending? Lobby? The bellman said. Lobby, she said. Her voice held. She was proud of it in the small, cold way you can be proud of a thing while it's costing you everything. The doors drew shut on the room before the room, on the garment bags and the warm bulbs and the screen where 200 people were still laughing at the most normal thing that had happened to a man in 3 years. The car began to fall, smooth as a held breath let out slowly. And the numbers over the door counted her down. 22, 21, and somewhere above her. Muffled through 20 floors of good hotel, she thought she could still feel the roar of the ballroom, the way you feel a subway before you hear it. Long day already, the bellman offered, gently, into the mirrored quiet. You have no idea. Wedding? He nodded at the apron, at the sprig of white ranunculus caught in the strap of her tote. Gone soft and open at the edges from the cooler and the heat and the whole ridiculous morning. You've got flowers on you. Christening, she looked at the little bloom, opened all the way now, past its best, the way ranunculus went when you almost stopped watching. I build them. I'm supposed to be building one right now. Then you should go build it, the bellman said, as though it were the simplest thing in the world, as though the whole city were not at this moment learning the shape of her face. People need the flowers to be there. My grandmother used to say, a room without flowers is a room that forgot somebody was coming, and Nora, who had held so far, felt her throat go to chalk. Because it was such a small kindness, and it was free, and it asked nothing, and free kindness that asked nothing was the exact thing she'd folded onto a piece of brown paper 3 years ago and mailed to a stranger. And look what it had grown into. Look what the smallest true thing could become if you left it alone long enough with a man and his machinery. 14, she said, to change the subject, watching the numbers. 13, her phone had not stopped. It buzzed against her sternum in a rhythm that had lost all its earlier hope, no longer a heartbeat that wasn't hers, just a swarm. The sound of a face being matched to a name in 1,000 rooms at once. She did not look at it. She knew what was in it. Vivian had drawn her the map, a photograph of her building by Friday, a headline, a superintendent with a story about a plant. The fire, laid and lit, 2 floors up, by a man with the right amount of charm. 10, she said. 9, the elevator stopped. Not at a floor. Between them, a soft, total halt, the numbers freezing on a lit 9. The little machine holding her suspended in the middle of the building's spine. The bellman frowned and pressed the button, and pressed it again, and said, Sorry, that's never. Hold on," and pressed the one with the small bell on it. And a screen set into the elevator's paneling, the kind that ran silent stock footage of the hotel's bar and its rooftop and its history all day long. Flickered, cut to black, and came back with a ballroom 2 floors down, and a lectern, and a face 40 inches tall in a small falling box, the same face, the same jaw, the same hand pushing the same dark hair off the same forehead, Julian Alder, live, patched into every screen the building owned by someone upstairs who had decided the whole hotel needed to hear this. Nora's stone dropped up the well again. She could not help it. Her traitor arms pressed the sweating water bottle to her chest, and her traitor eyes went to the small, bright box, and Julian Alder was not talking about the tour. He had stepped back from the lectern. In the falling box, she watched him take 1 step away from the microphone, and the room caught it. The way rooms catch a change in weather, the laughter fraying into a hush. "I want to correct something," Julian said. "The good microphones bent to carry it, all that money, all that machinery, straight into an elevator stuck between floors." Nora stopped breathing. "A minute ago, a man asked me who the woman was, the coffee girl. And I gave you the line." A pause, and in the pause she could see the sidewalk eyes come up through the photograph smooth face, the water pouring back into the cracked glass. "I gave you the line because a very smart person who has protected me for 3 years built it to keep somebody safe, and I said it because I was frightened, and I've spent 3 years pretending I stopped being frightened." So, the correction. He put both hands flat on the lectern. "She's not no one. I said that. I want it on the same cameras that carried the lie." The ballroom made a sound. Nora felt in her teeth even 2 floors up, a single indrawn breath from 200 chests at once. "Julian," said the bellman softly, staring at the little screen, "is that are you?" He looked at the ranunculus in her strap. He looked at her face. His own went slack with the arithmetic of it. "Don't," Nora whispered. "Please don't do this. You'll hand me to them." But he couldn't hear her. He was 2 floors down and 40 inches tall and going off the map on purpose, and there was nothing she could do but stand in a stopped elevator and watch him set fire to the tidy morning that ate everyone. "3 years ago, I walked off a stage," Julian said, "and everybody in the world had a theory about why. And a stranger wrote me a letter and mailed it to a hotel care of a flower shop and told me the truth for free, that some songs finish you, and a person's allowed to be the second kind of thing and still deserve his supper and a warm room. I've carried it in my wallet since. I read it 200 times. It's the only true thing anyone's written about me, and I let you believe I wrote it, because that was easier than the fact." He straightened. "I didn't write it. She did. And this morning I stood in her shop, and I was so afraid of what you'd do to her that I called her no one to her face, on your cameras, while she stood 2 floors up listening. So here's the announcement you actually came for." He picked up a water glass from the lectern, looked at it, set it down again, and stepped away from the microphone entirely. "I'm going to go find her," Julian said, from a foot back, so the microphone barely caught it, so the whole ballroom had to lean. "And I'm going to apologize like a person and not like a press release. The tour's real. The record's real. It'll all still be here in an hour. she might not be. And he turned, and he walked toward the back of the stage, into the dark, at the edge of the lights, the exact thing he had done 3 years ago. The walk that had made him a legend. Except this time, Nora could see, in the little falling box, that he was not walking into the dark at all. He was walking toward a door. The elevator lurched and dropped, and the numbers began to move again. 8, 7, and the bellman looked at Nora with his whole young face open and said, "You have to get out of the lobby." There are photographers in the lobby. There have been photographers in the lobby since 10. He was already pulling a key card, already thumbing a button that lit a discreet B for a basement she hadn't known was an option. Service level. There's a door onto 76th. My cousin does the loading dock. He stopped. Grinned, helplessly, the way she'd grinned at Julian in the shop. A room without flowers forgot somebody was coming. Go build your christening. I'll hold them off with a luggage cart if I have to. Why? She said. Why would you? Because he just told 200 cameras it was the only true thing anybody ever wrote about him, the bellman said simply. And you're standing in my elevator with it stuck in your apron. That's a thing you help with. That's just a thing you help with. And the doors opened on a concrete corridor smelling of laundry steam and cold cement and the green rot sweet ghost of yesterday's flower deliveries, and Nora Bell ran. She ran the way she'd walked twice now, fast, head down, feet remembering a route her brain had surrendered, up a ramp and through a fire door propped with a folded rag and out into the white hammer of the July Street on 76th, blocks north of the ballroom, and the heat came up off the pavement and grabbed her, and the sun laid its full weight across her shoulders where 2 coffees had. Once landed on someone else's, and she did not look for a black car, and no black car came. Because for once nobody had planned this, nobody was following at a distance making 3 phone calls, nobody knew where she was, for 1 more hour, no one. And she used it. She poured it into her legs, and she went to the flowers. The bell over Marguerite's gave its asthmatic clank, and the cold green breath of the cooler reached out and grabbed her. And it was the only thing in the whole screaming lit-up city that had not changed since yesterday. And Nora stood inside her own life, gasping. And Marguerite Osai looked up over the reading glasses from the ledger and did not say anything wry at all. "He said it on the television," Marguerite said. "I have a little one in the back. I heard." She had risen from the stool. Her sharp brown eyes were doing something Nora had never seen them do. "He said your letter was the only true thing. In front of everyone. That fool of a beautiful man. He called me no one an hour ago, Rita. And then he uncalled it in front of 200 cameras, which is a great deal harder, and which no one has ever done for me, and I have been alive a long time." Marguerite came around the counter, trailing her hand along the tile the way she did it close, and she took Nora by both wet-flushed cheeks with 2 dry, cool hands that smelled of stems and eucalyptus and the whole 7 years of the shop. And she looked at her the way she'd looked at the paintings Nora pretended she didn't want to stand in front of. Now, the Ferreira christening is in the cooler, half-built, going soft, and you are going to finish it, because that is who you are. And because when he walks through that door, and he is going to walk through that door, girl, I have seen enough men come through this door to know the walk of one who is already halfway here. I want him to find you doing the true thing, and not waiting on him to arrive and make you real. Nora's eyes spilled over, finally, hot into the cold air. "You wrote me the loveliest thing I ever read on a card," Marguerite said, "and spelled beloved wrong doing it. And I have never once told you that both of those are true at the same time. Go build the wires where you left it." So she built. Her hands shook, and then they didn't. She pulled the white ranunculus, cold and heavy-headed and opening slow, and she wired the first spray with her thumb, finding the 2 calluses 7 years had earned it, and the smell rose around her, cut stems in cold water. The peppery bite of eucalyptus, the wet newspaper smell of the brown paper, and it held her the way the counter had held her at the Carlisle, the way the letter had held a stranger in a rainy city 3 years ago. One true small thing, doing the work true small things do. The cooler hummed its low animal note. A bucket dripped in the back, patient as a clock. Outside, the July street churned, and did not yet know where she was. The bell clanked. Nora did not turn around. Her hands kept moving over the ranunculus, wiring, trimming, the way you keep your hands moving when your whole chest has gone to noise, and she heard the door swing shut and the 2 temperatures fight across the threshold, hot and cold, and then she heard him stop, just inside. In the seam of them. "You've got flowers on you," Julian said. "I always have flowers on me," Nora said to the ranunculus. "It's my genre." She heard him come 1 step closer and stop, the way he did everything, as though the morning could wait, and it occurred to her that he must have run too, that somewhere between a lectern and this counter he had shed the whole machine. Because his breath wasn't even, and his voice, when it came, had lost every degree of the press conference smoothness. "I need to say a thing," Julian said, "and I need to say it before you turn around, because if you turn around, I'm going to lose my nerve and do it charming, and you deserve it uncharming." Nora's hands went still over the flowers. She did not turn around. "When you told me on the sidewalk that you were nobody," he said, "I heard it. I heard exactly what it was, because I've been doing the same thing for 3 years with a bigger budget. You threw the word down like a coat, so nobody could use the real one on you. And this morning I picked your coat up off the ground, and I put it on you in front of the whole world, and I called it protecting you. A breath. It wasn't protecting you. It was protecting me. I was frightened, and I let a smart, tired woman convince me that frightened was the same as kind. It isn't. I've built 3 years out of confusing those two, and you spilled 2 coffees on it, and I could suddenly see the seam." The cooler hummed. A bucket dripped. "There's a cost," Julian said. "You should know it, because you're the kind of person who counts the cost of things, and I don't want to hand you a gift with the price torn off. Vivian built me a line, and I broke it on live cameras. And by tonight, the story isn't the record. It's the man who walked off a second stage to chase a florist. And half of them will decide I've lost my mind, and the tour will have a harder time. And some of the people I love, who eat because I work, will have a leaner autumn than they'd planned. I did the arithmetic in the elevator. I did it fast. I want you to know I did it. And I want you to know the answer came out the same both times." "You shouldn't have," Nora said. Her voice was thin again, the sidewalk thinness. Rita's plant. My building. "You were the only thing standing between me and Friday, and you just no." She heard him move, heard him come to the far end of the counter, close enough now that the cold sweating door of the cooler threw his reflection up beside hers in its glass, warped and green. "That's the other thing I came to say, and it's the part Vivian's downstairs making true right now, so it's not a promise I can't keep. There's no Friday, not the one she drew you. She'd already started before I got in the car. She's very good. It's the whole architecture of her. She is at this minute personally sitting on every editor she's spent 30 years, terrifying. And the story she's giving them, instead of yours, is a better one, which is the only currency that beats a story. And it's true, which is the rarest form of it." His warped green reflection turned its head toward hers in the glass. She's telling them the letter was anonymous kindness sent to a stranger with no reward attached, and that the woman who wrote it declined a great deal of money this morning to keep it that way, and that if a single one of them photographs your building or bothers a 71-year-old florist, she'll remember it for the rest of their careers. It's not romance, what she's doing. It's the other thing. It's the thing you wrote me about. It's somebody deserving a warm room. Nora turned around. He looked terrible. That was the first thing. The assembled press conference man was gone, the crisp gray shirt open at the collar and darkened at the back, where he'd run through July, the dark hair fallen back over the forehead the careful hand had swept it off of, and the shaved jaw doing nothing now to hide that his face had come all the way apart into the smaller one, the one she'd seen first, on a sidewalk over a ruined shoulder. He had a piece of paper in his hand, the furred blue one. He set it on the counter between them, on the purple dahlia stain, and this time he opened it and turned it so the uphill blue slant faced her, so she could read her own 3 years younger handwriting telling a stranger he deserved his supper. "I'm not going to keep it if you want it back," he said. "It was always yours. I only borrowed the warm room." Nora looked at the letter she'd thrown away twice and mailed once and never once thought a soul would read. She looked at the callus on her thumb. She looked at the man who had walked off 2 stages now, the second one toward a door instead of into the dark. "Keep it," she said. His face did something she'd remember a long time. "But you have to do a thing for me first," she said, and her voice steadied itself the way it hadn't all day. "Because I have spent 29 years being the person things happen around, and about 40 minutes being the person they happen to. And I have discovered I have a preference, and I'm going to be greedy about it exactly once." She came around the end of the counter. She stopped an arm's length from him, close enough to smell the July heat coming off his collar, and under it, faint and absurd, the ghost of yesterday's coffee that no stain pen had fully won. "Ask me my name. The real way. Like there's no car, and no earpiece, and no screen. Like it's just a Tuesday, and you got coffee thrown on you by a woman with a mind of its own for an arm." Something happened at the corner of his mouth. Not the screen smile. The distant careful relative of one, coming closer degree by degree the way it had learned to. "What's your name?" Julian said. "Nora," she said. "Nora Bell. I do the 6 a.m. Open at a flower shop that can't afford its whole sign. I keep a plant alive out of spite. I spell beloved wrong. And I wrote you that letter because you didn't owe anybody the rest of the song. And I still think that, and I'd think it if your face was on a screen or on a bus or on nothing at all in the whole wide world." "Nora Bell," he repeated, low, even, the calm that had finally stopped costing him anything. "You keep repeating me." "You're worth repeating," Julian said. "It's not a compliment. It's a diagnosis." And Nora Bell laughed, helplessly, wetly, hating and loving how much she needed to, in the cold green breath of the only room in the city that hadn't changed, and she did not say the enormous word, and neither did he. Because it was too soon, and they both knew it, and that was its own kind of tenderness, but he reached out, slow, as though she were an animal he didn't want to spook. And he took the wilting ranunculus out of the strap of her tote, where it had ridden through 2 elevators and a service corridor and a run-up 7th in the sun, and he looked at it, opened all the way now, past its best, still holding on. "It opened," he said. "They do that," she said. "They open slow, when you've almost stopped watching." "That's the entire point of them," Rita says. "I'd like to watch," Julian said. "If that's, I don't know how to do the next part. I've never done the next part, where the cameras go away and the person's still there in the morning. I only know the leaving. I'm going to be bad at it for a while." Good thing you know a woman who cleans up after other people's spills, Nora said. I've got 3 stain pens. Occupational hazard. From the back of the shop, where she had retreated with the enormous discretion of a woman who was billing no one for her time, Marguerite Osei's voice came dry and clear over the hum of the cooler. If the 2 of you are quite finished, the Ferreira christening still needs its ribbon, and last time somebody spelled a simple word wrong, I heard about it for a week, so this time I'll be checking. Julian looked toward the voice. He looked at the shut ledger on the counter, and the buckets, and the sweating cooler, and the ribbon spools, and the whole small green kingdom that had told him the truth for free 3 years before he found the nerve to walk in the door. And he took off the assembled man entirely, the last of him, and set it down where he'd set the letter, and picked up a spool of ribbon instead. "Show me," he said. "I'm good with my hands. I used to make things that open slow, too." The christening went out at noon. The bride's cousin wept in the good way. The ribbon spelled every word correctly, checked twice by a 71-year-old woman over reading glasses, and once, badly, hopefully, by a man whose face was at that moment still turning on 100 screens across the city, spelling nothing at all now, only holding. By evening the story Vivian Shaw had put into the air had done its work the way the true ones do, quietly, without a headline about a building. Nobody photographed the 4th-floor windowsill in Sunnyside. The spite plant lived out of spite. The superintendent, offered money for a story about the coffee girl, was reported to have said he didn't know any coffee girl, only a nice quiet tenant who kept a plant alive and paid her rent on time and shut the door. Though whether that was decency or whether it was a smooth silver-blonde woman who had gotten to him first with the particular patience of someone paid to wait. Nora never entirely learned, and Vivian, when asked, only smiled the warm, useful smile and said some things a person managed and never billed for. She came by the shop once, that autumn, when the leaves had gone gold on the steps, and the standing order had turned from summer stock to the first branches of the season. She did not buy anything. She stood just inside the door and was appraised, this time, by a cooler and a ledger and a florist who did not rise from her stool. "I came to apologize," Vivian said, "which I do approximately twice a decade, and which I am now doing to a room full of flowers, which is not where I imagined this year going." She set something on the counter on the purple dahlia stain, and slid it 1 inch toward Nora with a single manicured finger, not a document this time, no inked X waiting. A key, a small brass key on a paper tag. The second bank of letters on your sign. The ballast. I had it seen to. Don't tell him, he'll want the credit, and I've decided I'm keeping this one. She almost smiled, and for once let it reach the tired eyes. It says the whole name now. At night. Marguerite's. I stood across the street last week and read all of it lit up, and I'll tell you, Miss Bell, I preferred it broken. But that's my cold black heart. The rest of the neighborhood will be delighted to have lost its argument. "You could stay for tea," Nora said. "It's a whole thing. Rita makes it too strong on purpose so people leave, but you seem hard to make leave." "I am impossible to make leave," Vivian agreed, and stayed, and it was, in its way, the last piece the machinery ever handed over. Not a signature, not a sum, just a tired woman choosing a warm room over a tidy one, which was the thing the letter had been about the entire time. They did not have the big, enormous word for a long while, Nora and Julian, and when they finally did it, was not on a stage or a screen or a sidewalk. It was on the fire escape of the 4th-floor walk, up on a soft night the next spring, with the spite plant putting out something that might, against all odds, turn into a bloom, and the radiator ticking off its wrong-headed July warmth into April, and the 2 cheap cups of coffee between them going cold, untouched, out of respect. Whatever you do, Nora said, nodding at the cups, don't spill those. I said that once, Julian said, to a stranger, worst advice I ever gave. She ignored it, and it fixed my whole life. Say it again. You're worth repeating, he said, and I love you. Which is not a diagnosis. It's the only line I ever wrote myself, and I checked it twice, and I even spelled it right. He looked at her sideways in the streetlight. Beloved, though, that one I'll always spell your way. It's better with the mistake in it. Everything true is. Nora Bell, who had spent 29 years being the person things happened around, leaned her head against the shoulder she had once ruined with 2 iced coffees on a July morning and watched a plant she'd kept alive out of pure spite decide, slowly, in its own time, when she had almost stopped watching, to open, and did not say the word back out loud, because she had already written it on a piece of brown paper years before she knew who it was for, and some true things you only have to send once. Down on the corner, half a city away, the last of his face was coming off the great screens over the square, folding away for the night to make room for the next enormous morning, and it did not matter to either of them at all. Because the smaller one was here, on a fire escape, in a plain gray shirt, watching a flower open with a woman who'd seen it first. If you stayed all the way to the end of this one, if you've ever been the person things happen around and quietly hoped, just once, to be the person they happen to, then this little corner of the internet was built for you. And there are more stories like it waiting. Take a moment, if it warmed you, to subscribe and stay close for the next one. Pull up a chair. The kettle's on, the flowers are fresh, and there's always room for one more.